On my first day of university, I met with my advisor. I don't remember a word of what he said, until, at the very end of the meeting, he stood up, handed me a piece of paper, and introduced me to the 900-year-old tutorial system at Oxford. Here's your first assignment. 9 o'clock next Thursday, you'll meet with Professor Rogers for your first tutorial. Hand in your essay 24 hours beforehand. And just like that, I was all alone. Me and this little piece of paper. And this is what it said. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Discuss. The good news is that I did understand 25% of the words. The bad news is that Wikipedia was still 16 years away. So I got on my bike and I wobbled over to the Radcliffe Science Library. And this is what greeted me inside. Index cards, thousands of them. It took me half a day to figure out what to do with all these little wooden boxes, and another 24 hours to figure out what exactly it was I was being asked to discuss. 6 long and laborious days later, I was standing in Dr. Rogers' office. He handed back our essays. Of course, I went straight for the grade. It was all I could do to hold back my tears of disappointment. But Dr. Rogers quickly engaged us in a discussion about the various theories of evolution. We didn't talk about whether they were right or wrong, but he asked us to assess how well any one of them could explain various natural phenomena we observe around us today. For example, how well does natural selection explain why social insects organize themselves into castes of soldiers and workers who scurry around all day feeding the queen? As we wrapped up at the end of the hour, I couldn't help but ask Dr. Rogers, what would I need to do to earn an A on my essay? He leaned forward a little bit and replied, Fiona, you did a fine job summarizing the various theories of evolution, and you did a fine job critiquing those theories. But Fiona, where is your theory of evolution? Let's fast forward a few decades. And now, if one of my own children is invited to discuss whether ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, they don't need to enroll in any university in order to learn about evolution. They can relax on the sofa, click a few links, and sign up for a MOOC, a massive, open, online course. If they check out mooc.list and search evolution, they'll find 290 of these free online courses on this topic alone. Last November, Charles Darwin University in Australia offered one that was introduced by none other than the great-great-grandson of Charles Darwin himself. In 2013, almost 15% of colleges and universities around the US were either already offering a MOOC or were planning to do so. So now, any one of us here can spend 5 hours a week watching online videos with inline questions, answering quizzes that are automatically graded, and participating in discussion forums with thousands of people all around the world who are just as interested as we are in almost any topic you can think of. All this for free, remember. In just one generation, learning about evolution has gone from flipping through index cards and orienteering in the library stacks to lounging on the sofa with a laptop. MOOCs were first offered in Canada around 6 years ago, but most of us heard about them in 2011 when a couple of Stanford professors offered a free online course on artificial intelligence and 160,000 people signed up. The media went wild. There were almost daily headlines proclaiming that this MOOC revolution would democratize education, deliver it more cost-effectively, and yield amazing insights that would lead to improvements in teaching and learning. As it happens, my education at Oxford led me to become a researcher, and 2 areas that I study are online learning and cost-effectiveness of educational interventions. So when I hear bold claims like these, I'm immediately forming a study in my head to test whether they're true. Over the last year or so, a colleague and I have been interviewing faculty members, administrators, and other researchers around the US and a few abroad, asking them, what are your goals for offering MOOCs? Are MOOCs helping you to achieve those goals? And are MOOCs really worth the enormous investment of time and effort? So, let's see how these bold claims stack up in practice. First, MOOCs will democratize education. Turns out the most common reason we heard for offering MOOCs was indeed to improve access to a high-quality education for people all around the globe. And it is indeed the case that millions of people around the world have been able to participate in these courses, and for some of them it has apparently been a life-changing experience. However, this democracy is only truly accessible to highly motivated learners who can afford to pay for high-bandwidth internet, and perhaps not surprisingly, it is mostly populated by people who have a BA, an MA, or even a PhD. It does not strike me that we are getting the biggest bang for our limited educational bucks by educating the educated. In fact, I would argue that we're increasing the divide between those who have access to education and those who do not. Now let's turn to the second claim, that MOOCs will deliver education cost-effectively. There are, of course, two parts to this question. What does it cost to develop and deliver a MOOC? And are MOOCs more or less effective than other educational interventions? To get a handle on the first part of the question, we conducted cost analyses of MOOCs at 4 different institutions, and we estimated the cost to develop and deliver a MOOC at the low end, $35,000, and at the high end, over $300,000. And that's per MOOC. And if you start to add in complex autograders, virtual labs, and simulations, it can get an awful lot higher still. The second part of the question, effectiveness. I must admit that when I first came into this, I started with a naive assumption that effectiveness of MOOCs would be measured by assessing how much anybody actually learns from a MOOC. However, it appears that in higher education, most people conflate the ability to complete and pass a course of study with having actually learned something. So it is difficult to tell whether MOOCs are really effective. The best we can do with MOOCs in terms of effectiveness is to assess how many people complete them. And in the case of MOOCs, it tends to be around 5% of the people who enroll in the first place. Of course, this is significantly lower than you would expect from a regular online course. But unless these MOOC completers can turn the MOOC into something of economic value, such as a college credit, a high school credit, or perhaps even a job, we'll be hard-pressed to say that MOOCs are cost-effective. Finally, let's turn to the last claim, that MOOCs will lead to improvements in teaching and learning. There is no doubt that one of the most positive impacts of MOOCs is that they have led instructors to question what it is they're doing in the classroom and to experiment with new strategies. Some of them are even doing formal research on teaching and learning, because when thousands of people are participating in an online course, and every click you make is recorded on that platform server, this translates into billions of pieces of data. Regrettably, very few people have been investigating in any serious way how much anyone learns from a MOOC, either relative to what they knew coming in, or compared to a control group of learners in a face-to-face course or a more similar asynchronous online course. So at this point, while we know that MOOCs have created a lot of commotion about teaching and learning, we don't know whether they've led to any significant improvements. But let's remember that MOOCs are still relatively new, and there may still be a place for them in the landscape of higher education over the coming years. Let me recount to you a few of the ideas that we heard from our interviewees about MOOCs and the future, at least the ones I happen to agree with. MOOCs will continue to exist either as standalone experiences or as the online portion of the increasingly popular flipped classroom model. But they will evolve in a number of ways. One, they will be targeted at more specific audiences, such as high school students who don't have access to a chemistry teacher or a Spanish teacher, or to the teacher themselves, who may need to teach a subject they weren't trained in, or to college students who want to take a course that isn't offered at their own institution. 2, MOOCs will continue to be low cost or free, but they will offer some revenue-generating services, such as online tutoring, the opportunity to meet face-to-face with a local instructor and a local cohort of participants, or to be placed in an online study group with a carefully selected group of peers. 3, MOOCs will offer a meaningful credential. It could be a high school or a college credit, or it could even be a virtual badge that's recognized by employers. 4, all that platform data will be used to create adaptive learning mechanisms so that my course experience is tailored to me and yours to you. And 5, from a pedagogical perspective, MOOCs of the future will converge somewhere between the current extremes of the connectivist MOOCs, which are all about network learning and creation of artifacts, and the X-MOOCs, which are more about transmission of knowledge and what we here might call drill and practice. MOOCs are also likely to affect some aspects of the economic model of higher education. Let me give you a few examples. Star MOOC instructors will become free agents and earn outsized salaries or even royalties for all the participants they attract to their institutions. 4-year residential education will be replaced by 3 years of residency and 1 year of online learning. All those introductory level courses that are offered at hundreds of campuses across the US, Econ 101, Psych 101, Stats 101, will each be replaced by a single MOOC. And finally, maybe someday each of us here will have our own lifelong learning accounts, which will allow us to pick and choose our own educational experiences, which may or may not include a college degree and may or may not include a few MOOCs. But in any event, will allow us to continue to acquire new skills and knowledge throughout our lives, whether that's parenting skills, learning the latest programming language, or learning how to cope with rising sea levels and sinking cities. Some of us may be acquiring MOOC-based credentials for a few $1,000s, while others are choosing Ivy League degrees for a few $100,000. The question at that point will be, is all this change for the better? Let me end by finishing the story I started with. 3 years after my first encounter with Professor Rogers, I sat for my final exams. There was another obscurely worded question, which I quickly unmasked as an essay on evolution. This time, I was able to present my very own theory of evolution. It wasn't right, and it wasn't wrong, but it could explain a few things we observe around us. Would I have been able to do the same thing after 3 years of MOOCs? I very much doubt it. But then again, how many more theories of evolution do we really need? Thank you.